So let's begin.
Mm.
Chelsea, how do we know each other?
Wow, I mean, that's such a big question. I feel like lifetimes of evolution have kept us in relative vicinities to keep sharing and connecting.
I think
But
you're right.
on a more practical sense, I think we met at the Burning Down the House symposium
Yeah.
that you organized.
I think it's the
It was a your
one of
idea,
my
was it?
favorite things that came out of it was meeting you. So I'm really delighted that
Oh,
that happened. Because I feel like we are definite soulmates in many
mm,
dimensions, many lifetimes. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I think these things are so tricky to talk about because they are just things that you feel far beyond words. So to talk about them is a little bit strange.
What
You
I
know, I don't.
struggle with is I think they're difficult to talk about because they come across as cliche or ridiculous when they're
Mm,
so profound. I think they're the most profound because you said they're just what we feel, and what we feel is so important, which is where our interests, I think, intersect, is this
yeah,
felt experience of being here. Yeah.
yeah. It's difficult because our feelings are so filtered through these discourses or like contexts. So
Mm.
you have to kind of navigate your heart through all these layers and levels of things that, you know, deduce your experience or actually reduce your experience into something that you can communicate by referring to different contexts culturally, which is just such a mind blowing effect, I think, on the reality of what goes on. You know, so much of it gets lost. Like you and I know what happened that day, but to try and speak of that to anyone else, it will just be so diluted that, you know, it's not a liqueur, it's not an essence, it's not an extract, it's just a diluted thing that we're trying to talk about, which just doesn't work.
But the minute you said navigated through the heart,
Mm,
I felt all of this tension in my body just drain away because you reminded me that's what I
mm,
worship and adore in you is it's not just discourse. It's you are an incredibly brilliant human being doing phenomenal research and design work, and I'll let you talk about it. But what I truly honor in you is your embodied description of that. Because you got up and you didn't do a typical paper at a conference. You created an atmosphere of healing, which is what's
mm,
profoundly needed. So I just wanted to
mm.
honor and thank you for that. Because you were, as was pointed out, the most junior member.
I couldn't believe that. I honestly couldn't believe that.
Uh,
Oh, but I think, well, let's talk about that because I appreciate you saying what you're saying to me, but also, you know, there's a string of pearls here. You know, you are next to me, but I am also next to the people that taught me,
yeah.
you know, how to communicate in that way. So I think maybe a nice place to start would be to just unpack that a little bit, if you'd like.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Do.
Um, so I think maybe a good place to start. You saw I was drinking out of this cup earlier. Um, I have gotten really into electrolytes recently. It's my new little obsession. Um, and I think having studied visual communication and being a very creative person, I think that one of the best things we can do as academics is relate very dense theory to beautiful, stimulating visuals that happen in our everyday lives. To, you know, to connect meanings and create similarity and familiarity, which just lets things become a little bit more digestible.
Yeah.
So with this whole electrolytes thing, I think it's so interesting how electrolytes and electricity work. You can immediately get these images of sparks
Mm.
or glistening or electricity, light, illumination, luminosity. And to think about drinking electrolytes, it's like you're drinking your own vitality. Maybe not your own, but you're drinking in vitality. It's sparking your system, it's getting the cells to work, all of that. Your neurons are firing. It's a lot more of a visual thing than saying, I'm taking a supplement, right?
Yeah.
Taking a supplement is quite a flat thing to say,
Yeah.
but drinking electrolytes, it brings up associations through our language systems, right? Which makes it a lot easier to understand. And then I think once you have that understanding, you kind of give maybe a subtle permission to your body to register what is happening. And through that registration, there's that familiarity again. So
Yeah.
it's like, I imagine that my cells and my body absorb a lot more or like respond a lot better if I tell it what it is doing. That sounds a bit strange, but if I know what's happening in my body, it's like my body knows what's going on. So it almost amplifies that happening.
Mm.
It's like something similar to, I guess, this whole
Mindfulness, kind of a conscious.
mindfulness, yeah, conscious breath, these
Yeah.
sorts of things.
I mean, you said something a little earlier where you said,
Mm.
my electrolytes, well, not mine, but I was like, yes, yours, because I'm with Marx on this. All possession is theft, like this kind of ego identification with mine, when the truth of it is, and I remember after mushroom medicine, I was eating, but I was eating myself. And like my teeth were the boulders, Chapman's Peak is a view from my window. And I
Yeah.
was Chapman's Peak and I just felt the truth, which is that we are part of everything and our energy, which can neither be created nor destroyed, has been here and will
Mhm.
be here
Mhm.
endlessly in many dimensions as well. I had a conversation with my friend Lily, who's studying physics. And I was saying, what about the spiritual dimension? How does physics grapple with that? And she's like, oh, no, we're not ready for that yet because it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't speak that language yet. And so I think
Mm.
this is one of our common interests is how do we speak this language and how do we engage
Yeah.
these magical realms or spiritual realms? I know this is interesting to you as well.
Exactly. I mean, this is what I want to go head first into with my studies this year, next year, the rest of my life, is sort of bringing these narratives together. And especially physics. I mean, physics is the language that we can use to talk about this. So physics needs to pull its socks up and get ready for some difficult conversations, because that is the domain in which these things can actually come to be. So, um,
My supervisor, Lisa, that I introduced you to, said what you're trying to do is so ahead of your time that it's going to be difficult for you to do it because it's a
mm,
proper interdisciplinary study, arts-based, you name it,
yeah.
neuroscience, the whole caboodle. And
Mhm.
I adore that. That's
I
what we
mean, it is kind
need.
of what I signed up for. It's very Aquarius, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Um, but I'm not worried about the difficulty. I think if anything, if it's not difficult, have it's not gonna have consequence. It's not gonna have repercussions. So I think the difficulty doesn't scare me
Mm,
at all. If
it's
anything,
exciting. Yeah.
it's exciting, exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
so okay, exciting. To come back to the electrolytes.
Yes.
Um, so like that conference, the symposium, um, and what you were saying about, you're speaking through the heart. But to say speaking through the heart, you can't stop there. You've got to elaborate on that. Because to say speaking through the heart implies that you're not speaking through the mouth. You're not speaking through the brain. You're speaking through this space, right? And the way I learned about that was Do you remember the very beginning of the symposium? I shared a couple of pictures. Um, yeah, with just some people that I've spent some time with
Yeah.
here around the Cape, but also just all over the world. These indigenous healers, these
Mm.
indigenous practitioners, all of these fancy words, but really it's just people who live in the world of organic matter and have very little exposure to technological matter or
Mm.
cultural matter. Grounded individuals who are in relational ontologies.
Yeah.
Um, and one of them was a Zimbabwean Sfikiru elder. And Sfikiru is the word kind of like shaman, but specifically for communicating with water and water spirits, water entities, water beings,
Mm.
sprites, nymphs, all of these words we can associate. But remembering, of course, that this individual is from the land that we refer to as Zimbabwe. So it's not embedded in the European nymph and things like that, but from an African context.
Mm.
So I went for a walk with this man, this individual, and we went up to sort of there. You might have to help me with the name of the place because I'm from this side of the world, but kind of the Table Mountain range, sort of not quite Cape Point, but not quite Hout Bay, sort of
Okay.
between Cape Point and Noordhoek.
So my mountain, silver mine.
Yeah, I think you kind of go around Noordhoek and then you can either access the top of it from like Simonstown or Noordhoek side, that
Okay.
range.
Oh,
Do
that
you know what I'm talking
beautiful
about?
stretch there. Yes, I
It's a
love that range.
stretch, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Love that.
And there's a big, big dam at the top there.
Amazing.
You know what I'm talking about?
Is it
Probably you do.
Plain Plus Dam that you're talking about? Maybe.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
name. I just know probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. I
yeah.
mean, you're on top of a mountain range. All you see is ocean and fynbos, and then this pool, this body of water,
Oh,
surrounded by purple buchu and green proteas, and just magic. Um, and it was one of those days where the clouds look so wispy, like they're almost like spirits taking shape and revealing themselves to us in the sky. It was one
mm,
of those days where everything was just beautiful and magical. So I was there with Baba Mandaza, the Svikiru,
mm,
and it was so interesting. I mean, interesting for me coming from my timeline and my culture, but I'm speaking to this man, and we're not really speaking with words. We're speaking kind of mind to mind, heart to heart. We're communicating in ways that are not strictly English, right? And just with simple things like a gesture of his hand or body language, subtle gestures and maybe key words here and there or postures. He
mm,
communicated so much to me that it gave me such a full body response.
mm.
What I mean by this is we were sitting by the water's edge and he would do a gesture, he would point to something, he would make a little movement with his hand, and I would physically with my body feel what he is communicating,
Mm.
right? So it's an interesting practice of shifting out of language models and into more embodied relational practices, right? And what he did, how he did it, I do not know. That's his life's work and his ancestral work, of course. But what he did was he it was like he took a face cloth and wiped my eyes,
Oh,
but what he did was he wiped away all of the lenses that I was culturally looking through. And just through sitting with this person, and I'm sure you as an individual can understand what I'm saying. You've had practices in Buddhism, you've had
yeah.
multiple experiences that can make you understand. But how can I explain this to someone who's never even dabbled or dipped a toe into those kind of ponds? It's like windscreen wipers for your perception. And
Yeah.
so what happened is I'm sitting there and all of a sudden all of my ideas of who I am, identity, place, class, race, all of these lenses just fell away. They were gone. And I was looking for the first time in my life straight into a body of water underneath the most magnificent sky, surrounded by fynbos, next to this Svikiru elder. It was just the most incredible thing. And he did all of this without speaking in English, right?
Mm,
And then it was like this area of my eyes started to enzymatically eat away this whole bubble that I was in. And all of a sudden, I can sense things from behind me. I can sense things underneath me. My whole
yeah.
3D being became aware of where I am. And like
Mm,
I was saying earlier, when you have that awareness, that permission for relationality, you can begin to actually take in information and process it and come to a kind of understanding. So,
mm,
having had that experience, that is what I take in to things like the symposium or like heartfelt one-on-one conversations with people. And just in general, I try to do it as much as possible to live in that state of being where you communicate not just with words, but you
mm,
communicate the feeling. And so it's kind of like those electrolytes are not limited to my flesh, but they
mm,
can actually move outwards and send information kind of like body Wi-Fi or like
mm.
body Bluetooth.
Yeah, that's exactly what
That
I'm
makes any
feeling.
sense,
Yeah, so that's what
right?
my nervous system, when I'm with you, is soothed. And even now through a screen, I feel your
Mm.
Wi-Fi. And it's
Fantastic.
it's so you are truly living what you espousing, which is what I
Mm.
truly admire in someone is because it's one thing to know these things, to feel them, to experience them, but then to put them into practice day to day, it's kind of a schlep.
Mm.
Because like
Yeah.
to be honest, I mean, for years I took people here on Silvermine Mountain to do these practices, obviously from my white woman stance, I'd
Mm.
start with some Qigong, which is ancient Chinese, and then we'd walk in silence, and I'd have them even walk with their eyes closed, so like fall into trust with the earth and your other senses, so that the eyes don't always predominate because they're quite greedy. It's interesting because you were just talking about the eyes kind of dissolving the body, which I loved. And then we get to a cave where we sit in silent meditation, and then slowly I start guiding through all the senses back to the eyes. And then we walk just sensory, engaging with the sensual experience of being in the world, touching, tasting, smelling, and trying not to name. So trying not to
Mm.
get words in the way every time. And I know in the way. And then eventually I do this kind of creative process with people where it brings to the forefront that you are, in fact, everything and everything is you, this kind of dissolution of separation. Um,
Mm.
but what you've just described to me, it's that, but without this kind of like very Western structured
Mm.
container that works. I mean, it's profound what happens on these walks. And it's hilarious because there's always, if people come in couples or in groups, there's always one very keen being whose idea it was. And then there's one other or a few others who are like, oh my God, kill me now. Like, I don't want to
Mm.
do this. And the ones who are the least keen are usually the ones who have the most amazing epiphanies and shifts.
Mm.
And I'm not sure what that's all about. I don't know if you want to riff on that. Like that kind of resistance seems to be almost crucial in terms of the breaking open that's
Mm.
required. I don't know if that's been your experience.
Yeah, I think it's that thing of your biggest fears come true, you know, magnets. Whatever you are pushing, you are actually attracting, And of course, all of this I'm borrowing from more Eastern philosophies and traditions. That's just how I've been able to comprehend it in my own life. Why
Mm,
is it that, when I want to avoid something, it happens every time?
mm,
There's teaching in that, or there's a lesson in that.
Is it
a
sort of shadow?
surrender.
Is it what everyone loves to call shadow work? This kind of, or that which you resist persists kind of vibes.
Mm, yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to talk about it, so many little sound bites, I guess. But I think it's just, yeah, what you resist persists. And maybe the people who are, do you know what it actually, it also does sound a lot like is, I think it was Rilke,
Mm,
I think it was Rainer Rilke. He was writing about, and I did draw from a lot of his poetry for my thesis last year. And
yay.
he was writing about angels, right? And he was saying how he was sort of in the poem, he's addressing this angel and he's saying, he's acknowledging that there's no way I can meet you because my my desire for you is so strong that it's blocking you in such a way that the delicateness of your wings cannot come through
Mm.
that intensity. I wish I could remember it word for word, but essentially when you have such a strong keenness for something, you're putting out a very intense energy, and something as delicate as an angel or as information or wisdom, the delicateness of life, the subtleties of information, they cannot come through that.
Mm.
It's like if a butterfly is flying towards you and you're blowing, you're huffing and puffing with your entire might, that butterfly will never reach you. So
Oh,
that's what he wrote in that poem. I'll see if I can find it, but
please do.
my word, it stuck with me so much because it's again this thing of it's that attraction and repulsion. When I want something, I'm pushing it away. When I don't want something, I go so in, you contract, and that's how you bring it forward, which is
Mm.
just like basic, mechanics of
Physics.
biology, physics, yeah, that
Yeah.
we just don't we're not taught about these things.
Yeah. Oh,
Pity.
darling. I
But
just,
this is why, yeah.
yeah, I just appreciate you. I just wanted you to know
Oh,
that
thank
in case it wasn't crystal clear.
you. But this is why I, the reason why we're having this beautiful meeting now is to talk about the new materialisms, especially the feminist new materialisms,
Yes,
is
please.
that, yeah, for those who don't know, this is the branch of philosophy and critical thinking and just human brains, post-human brains. Um, it's the field that is doing the most work, and I think the best work
Mhm.
in changing the way that we comprehend the world and our aliveness in it.
Yeah.
And that is just the most exciting thing I think ever. I think it's
Same.
so much more exciting than going to the moon or colonizing Mars or oh no,
Yeah.
none of that.
No, it
It's
literally
just so
saved my life. I mean, I
yeah.
was in such a despond in the
Mm,
aftermath of the pandemic and my own midlife crisis and, just a melange of misery. And
yeah.
I sat in on Lisa, who I introduced you to's new materialism course for the third years in visual studies at Stellenbosch University. And oh my Lord, it, it it was a spiritual experience, absolutely, where I felt it redeemed academia for me because I'd gone very cold on it and kind of felt very done. And suddenly I felt like I was only beginning, which is a very good place to be. Where I just love to be a student and to feel excited about how much there is still to unpack and discover. And because that's our birthright. We're here to be
Mm,
curious and to explore and have a big adventure. And that's what I
yeah.
feel with that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just what a time to be alive. I mean, if ever there was a time to say that,
Yeah.
now is the time. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting because I think it was Jane Bennett,
Mm.
I hope, who said that this field of philosophy and theory is all about creating a re-enchantment with the world. And that just made me so excited because
Yeah.
I think just who I am as a person, I really enjoy this motif of stringing things together.
Yes.
And so, there'll be a thread,
Yes.
and that thread is like a timeline. And as time goes by, there's these potencies that collect, they calcify or they pearl around a certain point. And I think there's been quite a long gap between the last pearl and the one that's forming now with these new materialisms. And what I find so interesting is that, as a globalized, westernized culture, we have things like the psychedelic revolution in the 70s.
Mm,
That was a hugely potent time
mm,
for that group of the species.
mm,
What I'm finding so interesting is that in these new materialisms, in the feminist new materialisms, across the board, there are so many cheeky little references to that time and times before it, going into alchemy and things like Rosicrucianism and Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and all of these incredible, incredible things that
yeah.
hold so much information that are not allowed in academic spaces. They're inappropriate in academic spaces. But
Thank
now
God
these
that's
new,
changing.
right?
Things are
And
just
we're
getting
the ones
juicy
changing it.
now. Like, thank
Exactly.
God. Because that's what it's doing for me is healing those
Mm,
parts that I thought didn't belong.
right.
Because either I was, this intellectual, or I was this like hippy dippy, new agey kind of like crazy person. And it turns
Yeah.
out, no, they're so entangled and enmeshed and so needed together. That's
Yeah.
how we heal ourselves and we heal our place in this world. Because I don't really like to talk about healing the world. I think the world is actually whole, but we're out of sync with that wholeness. And so we feel icky. And then we project that ickiness outward.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I think you can see a lot of that happening with masculinity today. My word. It's just so difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
like speaking to guys my age and younger, I just it's such a heartbreak because you can see through to their core, but you can also see how stuck they are with all these layers of expectation of how they should be.
Mm.
And it's just so difficult because I think the crux of it is just it's heartbreaking to see it's heartbreaking to see people struggling with the ick and not being able to see through to themselves and just being stuck in a very difficult, toxic place and not be able to get through to the clarity of it. It's
Mm.
just so difficult
Well, I find
to.
myself, I circle back, I talk about the spiral way in my life because and it's not that we're spiraling the drain. It's just you
Right.
kind of keep coming around to the same issues. Maybe I'm just a very slow learner. And oh, it's there. And it's
Mm,
kind of about, that's why I love meditation, because it just teaches you to be with it, be with it, be with it again and again and again, whatever it is. But often there is a great deal of ick physically, mentally, emotionally. I
mm,
was on meditation retreat yesterday morning with the Tibetan Buddhist Sangha, and um, it just struck me that my mind is like the endless scroll of social media.
oh,
Just like all the snippets of kind of like sound bites and nonsense, like
mm,
so much
mm,
nonsense, as well as, moments of peace and stillness, which are such bliss. There's just a lot of nonsense. And I mean, I've been meditating forever and a day. So I think it's just the most humbling practice because you're always just beginning again and you never know what the sit's going to deliver?
yeah, yeah,
So there's a lot of ick that's part of life. And it's something I'm trying to teach my teenagers is that there's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling grim or something that you don't want to feel. That's part of the experience of feeling. Just allow it. Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
think we've got this kind of idea that there's something wrong with us when we're not, what, 100% happy, productive, like these capitalist machines.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it is crazy. I think it's something that it's been boiling down to for me is that when I am when I am able to identify my emotion, that's kind of like a warning sign for me.
Huh.
Like if I feel just so elated and ecstatic and happy and jolly and I'm bouncing off the walls, then I'm like, okay, simmer down, simmer down. And
Uh,
if I'm really just like moping around like Eeyore and just blue and just not having it, that's also exactly the same, a warning sign. I think happy and sad, if you simplify it, are good indicators of you not being
in balance.
in balance. Exactly. I think from my little experiences of life thus far, when I feel nothing, and I don't mean numb, I don't mean unable to sensualize, but when I feel no thing is coming to the forefront, that's when I'm at my best. Because that's when I'm able to actually perceive things that are happening around me. You know,
Mm.
I'm not distracted by my own um
Soap
you
opera.
know what I love? Let me tell you what I love. This word delusion.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with this word because if you look at how it's written with a capital D, you have this straight line and then a convex half of a circle, semicircle.
Mm.
And it's just so true about if you think about projection,
Mm.
right? It's you, it's at your base, and then you're pushing out a worldview. You're pushing out a lens, right? These convex semicircles. So a
Mm.
little bit conceptual, but bear with me. But if we think about illusion, it comes from luminous, to illuminate, to enlighten, to shine a light on something is to be able to see it. But if you're trapping that within a lens, then all you're going to see is the projections that you are, like you said, your the sound bites and all the little things in your mind are just going to play back on the screen, right? And that's your delusional self, right? You've
Yeah.
gone so far into some topic that you're pushing this topic out around you, and that's all you're
Mm.
seeing. And I think it's so potent that delusions can be happy as well, not just sad. So it's exactly what you're saying. There's nothing wrong with you when you're in the ick. It's nothing bad about being sad or depressed or going through something really difficult. But we can't avoid, the opposite of that, which is these hyper almost manic states of pure capitalism or neoliberalism where you're just buying, 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 producing, producing, organizing. It's exhausting, you
So
know?
exhausting.
Depression is exhausting, but so is ecstasy, you know? But I think the practice is to come as close as you can to just being with nothing. And
The
it's so
emptiness.
Buddhist
Yeah.
what I'm saying, isn't it?
No, it's
But
exactly my greatest love is to try and cultivate equanimity and
mm,
and to really, I mean, when you sit with emptiness in the Buddhist sense of the word, it is so much preferable to even the bliss and obviously to the
exactly.
agony. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And as you said, make space for true attention, mindfulness, to use the buzzword. But that's where life is. It's in paying
Mm,
attention. I wholeheartedly agree.
mm,
And thank you for being so honest with yourself because it's a gift to others because it gives us the opportunity to be more in this stew, but not stewing.
yeah. Mm, not stagnant.
Break
That's
out
the
of the
thing is
Delulu.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the thing of like, what I am receiving, what I am perceiving, I'm also it comes and it goes.
Mm,
So we can't. I don't want to isolate it into me. I don't want to isolate it into this conversation
mm,
or this symposium or
mm.
this branch of critical theory. I don't want to isolate anything because it's, I think, such a momentum that's been cultivating for so many years
Yeah.
that is finding ways to break through in every way that it can. So where I have learned things from experiences and people and time and space and land and sea and air, it's just gonna flow through me.
Yeah.
And that's like, I'd rather recognize the it than the I, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite things. Brought you my shells and my rocks. I
Oh,
knew that this bunny tail. My
oh,
daughter tickled my face with this once upon a time.
oh my God.
Caesar, I thought I need to bring some presents for Chelsea. Thank you for talking to me. I will definitely share
Oh,
your beautiful, beautiful podcast, which is profound and also incredibly soothing. All I'm interested in is things that help soothe my nervous system. And that is
yes.
definitely your podcast. Yeah. You know how some
Oh,
people are seeking out, they chase states, so like
yes.
you said, retreat yourself, which was nightmarish for me. Sorry, but it was.
It always is
And
for me. I
oh
can't
my
go anymore.
gosh.
It's the
And
end
they
of
were
that.
darling young woman that I'd met previously came up to me and she said, "Oh, you need to try the ice bath and the breath work." And I'm just standing there going, I'm not doing any of those things. Environment is already very extreme. I'm just going for sound baths and like anything that's gentle and and soft and soothing. Yes, please. More of that. Yeah.
Then you need to get yourself some peppermint oil
I do
and
have.
some milk. Yes, and just sprinkle it around like fairy dust. It is so
Yeah.
spectacularly just the best.
Helpful. Yeah. Thank you, my love.
Mm.
I really appreciate you.